Mr. Amir Guraya, Resident Representative UNDP, Deputy Resident Rep in UNDP. And then followed by this, there is a discussion, roundtable discussion session, which is a longer part of this session, which will be moderated by Mr. Arif Rahman.
The panelists would be Mr. Hardesh Joshi from NDTV India, Ms. Shabnam Baloch, Country Director IRC, Mr. Aftab Alam, Resident Future International, Engineer Mehman Abdul Jabbar Sahab. He himself is a, from private sector is a big name. Of course, we are proud of having him as a his board member of SDPI as well. Then Mehak Masood from also private sector. Then Amira Sawas, our colleague from Fossil Fuel Treaty. She will also be joining the panel. And we are expecting Bilal Anwar Saab, I guess he would be around. So that would be the today's speakers and panels. So may I request Mr. Amir Guraya Saab to please join as chair here. So, Dr. Abid Qayyum Suleri Saab, Executive Director SDPI, Dr. Ali Kamal Saab,
Mr. Sanjay Rashid. Dear audience, as you know, sustainable consumption and production, this is covered under SDG 12, which is very important. If you think it is important because it relates to our lifestyle, our consumption pattern, and our production pattern. If we produce more, if we consume more, we produce more. Are we sustainable in our production and consumption? And what for carbon footprint we are generating? So these kind of issues would be the been discussed in this panel. SDPI has done a study both on the regional context and also Pakistan context. Pakistan has had a policy plan in 2017, which has been reviewed by SDPI team led by me, where we have seen what are the policy landscape in Pakistan on sustainable consumption and production. Similarly, we had a regional study on the SASAP countries, which is formed, almost all the SAARC countries are part of it. What is the status of sustainable consumption and production in these countries? So this panel is not meant basically to introduce or to present these studies, but it is broader on the discussion side. So I would not take much time here, and I would request Dr. Abid Qayyum Suleri for his welcome remarks in this regard. Please, sir. May I request Ms. Roshan Barocha and Shabnam Baloch, please also join here in this panel also. आप रोशन साहब जी जी आप.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed an honor to welcome you to discuss sustainable consumption, production, and of course, how it will contribute to circular economy as well as to the broader goals of achieving sustainable development goals. Now, when I sit in this part of the world, I usually think that the concepts brought forwarded by different multilateral organizations, they were practiced here for centuries. So circular economy, sustainable consumption, sustainable production, it has always been part of subcontinent's culture. And those of you, if you don't remember how informal recollection that worked in this part of world, how the memes and jokes are made in USA or UK that if you visit, want to identify if someone is from South Asia origin, go to his or her kitchen and you will find all the empty jars and empty bottles being used for storage of different spices and different commodities. And that is in fact the historic culture of circularity that we inherited. And now once again we are back to trying to be back to nature, trying to see that how that culture can be brought back again. I, as a kid, remember taking this cloth bag and going for grocery. I used to have that metal bowl and go and get yogurt instead of getting it in this pack. And all of these things. So when STPI was approached last year and asked to do this study, mapping Pakistan's landscape on sustainable consumption production and for Switch Asia program, we were extremely happy, and we knew that there is abundance of policies on this sustainable consumption, on sustainable production. And Dr. Shafqat Munir and the team, they have identified, and I'm hopeful that in their formal presentation, he would be alluding to the policy landscape in different sectors. But beyond it, I think this program that has brought South Asia closer. And you could see on panel as well as the participants sitting here. This program was actually implemented in countries who are member of South Asia Cooperative Environment Program, SASIP. And SASIP is the only functional environmental vehicle in South Asia. As you know that SAARC, unfortunately, is sort of stalled. But SASIP, again, a regional body, which is the secretariat is in Colombo, that is still functional. It has a lot of potential. So when we say that climate change, environmental, these issues, climate change, smog, and various others, they are not taking being taken forward in South Asia due to non-functionality of SAARC. Perhaps this SASIP, its potential should be explored. It has a secretariat in Colombo. It is a UNEP funded body, a subsidiary of UNEP. And the study was in SASIP country. And I hope during the course of deliberation, we will be able to see and relate to what are different practices of sustainable consumption and sustainable production in SASIP countries. I won't take much time, but I just wanted to add that while during recent times, most of the focus was on sustainable production. I think this consumption part is equally important, and especially to reduce inequality and inequity among our societies, we need to promote this slogan that wealth belongs to an individual, but resources belong to society, and no individual can be permitted to exploit those resources by virtue of his or her wealth. And I think that is the key message coming from these different studies. And we can see when we talk of, for example, closing shops early to save electricity in this country, or when we talk of power outage or gas outage, it's not about affordability, that who can afford to pay and who cannot. It is about the fact that some of the resources are simply depleting, and individual members of society cannot be given permission that by virtue of their wealth, they can, on one hand, there is a minority of society who can exploit all resources due to their wealth, and there are other who are suffering because they can't buy it. So this is whole concept of sustainable consumption and sustainable production, to me, is one of the fundamentals to promote social justice in society, to promote social justice, to take care of inequalities and inequities. And one is looking forward to learn more about it. And we are hoping to continue contributing towards policy debate in this new area, which, as I said in my earlier remarks, historical practice in part of this world, but new discourse in policy discussions on climate change and on SDGs. Thank you very much, Shafqat, for inviting us.
Thank you, Dr. Abid Suleri sir. Whatever Dr. Abid Suleri has just mentioned, and it was the summary of what we have done. I will not take much time. I'll just run through the presentation so that you should have an idea which sort of policies and sector-wise policies we have reviewed in Pakistan. Up the slides go one by one, zara quickly chalana shuru kar de. This is just a backgrounder. Okay, carry on. I'm not speaking again. Next. So these are the major priority sectors where we have worked on: climate change, energy, sustainable, and then the policy landscape underneath. Okay, carry on. See, policy landscape, which policies we have on which sector. Next. Energy. Sustainable food systems. Next. Sustainable building and cities, policy landscape in Pakistan. Carry on. Transport, water, policy landscape. Land ecosystem, marine ecosystem, industry, education. And these are some of the key findings, which certainly Dr. Abid Suleri has briefly mentioned in his presentation. Thank you so much. This was just a brief introduction of the study about Pakistan. May I request Sanjay Vashisht to set the context here? And certainly he will cover some part of the regional.
Thank you, SDPI, for inviting us. And it has been a smooth journey from Wagah to here, coming from Delhi and Kolkata. So thank you very much. And thank you for agreeing to organize this roundtable with Switch Asia. And one of the reasons why we felt that this roundtable need to be organized is to create a discussion among stakeholders, various stakeholders coming from private sector, coming from academia, coming from civil society, policymakers, and also policymakers can hear what are the expectations on sustainable consumption and production. We are only 2 weeks away from Dubai COP28, climate negotiations starting. And in ongoing climate negotiations, there are discussions about global stocktake, basically how much climate change we have been able to address in terms of vulnerability, but also how much we have been able to reduce in terms of greenhouse gas emission reductions. So global stocktake is taking place. We're talking about loss and damage, permanent losses to ecosystem, lives, livelihoods. There's little bit discussion about sustainable consumption and production, but still these two streams are parallel to each other. They are being discussed. For example, sustainable consumption and production is very vocal in SDGs, but not in climate agenda. And while there's a SDG on climate agenda also, and there's SDG 12, SDG 12 and 13, both are on climate agenda as well as sustainable consumption production, but they do not integrate. And what we firmly believe, the work that we are carrying out in South Asia, is the integration will bring in a lot of co-benefits in terms of mitigation, adaptation also. And this roundtable is basically about that. I'm sure Arif Bhai will explain more about the objectives. If I can just present 2 slides just to set the context. We are planet itself is facing 3 planetary crises. Pollution is one. We know what is happening in Lahore. Parali is being burned. Transport, vehicular pollution, and also all that is. Loss of biodiversity and also climate change. The 3 planetary crises that we are facing, and all can be attributed to unsustainable consumption and production. It's the luxury lifestyle or wasteful lifestyle that leads to creating these problems. And scientific community has already firmly established there is a link between climate change and material consumption. I personally believe it's the wasteful lifestyle, because whenever we measure emissions in cumulative or even in per capita, it's the wasteful lifestyle, basically consuming more than one should, that leads to three planetary crises. In past 5 decades, the global population has doubled and it's going to go up. So basically, the availability of resources has gone down per capita, and that also creates a problem. And that's why we have to curtail our consumptions. I'm not saying that we should actually sacrifice the way we live, but I think we can certainly bring in a lot of higher efficiency in ensuring that we consume less and we save more. And we save for the future generations. We're not talking about existing. We cannot consume today for today's resources and tomorrow's resources also. As Abid Bhai has rightly said, wealth may be for one, but resources are for everybody to share. In last 20 years, a noticeable acceleration in extraction and utilization of natural resources. And everything we have on earth, basically the commodities we have are from the natural resource raw material. So we have to conserve natural resource here. Use of natural resource is responsible for about 50% of effects we observe in climate change. And there is a resource panel, international resource panel, that has done the mapping also. Next, please. And when we look at the climate pillar, we are heading towards 2.8 degree temperature rise. Greenhouse gas emission reductions are not enough. The commitments that has been put on the table are not enough. What Pakistan has faced in terms of floods, I think more than 30% country was flooded. That's because there is already a temperature of 1.1 degree global average temperature gone up. And based on NDC, the current nationally determined contribution by all countries, we are going to go beyond. We actually need around 23 or 24 gigaton of carbon dioxide, which is huge numbers. And that's why the existing global stocktake or review, which is going on, aims to bridge that gap of how much science says is required and how much countries are delivering. So keeping that in mind, we firmly believe that sustainable consumption and production can add to the co-benefit, as in terms of co-benefit, can add to the mitigation objective, and also adaptation. Saving water would lead to sustainable consumption, but saving water could also mean higher resilience against drought. So that's why this dialogue is being has been organized, and we look forward to participate in this actively. I just want to share last slide. I'll not go through all. So why we think the sustainable consumption production need to be part of climate agenda? Because we want to achieve the first. We want to bend the curve of temperature rise like this, rather than overshoot. An overshoot scenario would mean we would need geothermal technologies to bring it down. That will be more costly, and every technology has a side effect, and we are not ready what that may be. So that's why it is important that we act now and we bend the curve as science is. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay Bhai, for setting the scene and telling or co-relating it with the climate change agenda. Thank you so much. Now I would request Dr. Ali Kamal Saab for his keynote address. Over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Shakurai, and thanks to STPI Switch Asia, my Canadian senior, Guraya Saab, and audience, thanks for you to come here and listening to us on a special agenda, which is sustainable consumption and production. And when I joined Planning Commission and UNDP few years ago, now I'm not in UNDP, but when I joined in 2017, so one of the tasks which we do not understand, and we spent some days or some weeks to understand it, is goal 12, sustainable consumption and production, because other goals were easier to understand: affordable energy, clean energy, education, health, food security, economic growth. Decent work was one of the concepts which we understood after reading the metadata. And then there was peace, justice, and strong institutions. The SCP, sustainable consumption and production, was one area in which we face a little difficulty, because we in general talk about production, we do not talk about the consumption, and because it is related to us. And when it is related to us, that it's our responsibility to take care of that. And we do not take care of our own things. We have two games which we love to play as far as the desis are concerned. I'm talking about Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, and there are other developing countries as well, Bangladesh, Nepal. So I'm talking about Pakistan right now. And that is gossips and blame game. So we love to blame government. We love to blame civil society. We love to blame our private sector. We love to blame development partners that they are not doing anything. We love to blame academia. The teachers are not good. Students are not at that part where we are working. I'm looking at the audience and I've seen a couple of students sitting here from Pide and Quaid-e-Azam University, and that's one of the great things which we have in these sessions. So guys, just setting the scene or whatever you call it, we have food loss or wastage of 36 million tons per year, according to the estimates of 2018. And if we multiply it with divided by 220 million population in 2018 and divided by 365. So per person, we are, the food loss is half a kg per day. So if you're wasting half a kg per day, so stop doing it. And that's one of the issues. And you can feed several hungry people. And this is just Pakistan. And as Dr. Abid Salari said, that we are in general by culture, by social norm, we are into recycling. But recycling doesn't mean that we are putting some of the threads and some of the buttons in the quality street box, or we are reusing the toothbrush as toothbrush and some kind of other activities. But the thing is that we need to stop using excess of water, as Sanjay Sahab said. Sorry, Sanjay, yeah, right. So what is sustainable growth? We all know. And coming back to what I have written last night, and when I see that it's a keynote address, it's not a panel discussion, I was a little freaked out that, oh, okay, right. So I need to address some of the serious stuff. And that's and I'm here right now. So basically, summing up and exploring more as far as the sustainable consumption and production is concerned. Number one thing, guys, I'm an economist, I'm a macroeconomist, and I say sustainable growth and development requires minimizing the natural resource and toxic materials used and the waste and pollution generated throughout the entire production and consumption process. So that's SCP, sustainable consumption and production, in a simple way. Though I believe that growth and the sustainable growth is the most important thing if we want to achieve sustainable development goals. I've been working for the last 7 years just on SDGs, and I never changed my mind that growth is not essential or growth is not important and growth is not sufficient. Growth is one indicator which is the most important one if we want to achieve sustainable development goals. Though we need to have a check on the resources as well. So sustainable production and consumption refers to use of products and services in a manner that is socially beneficial. So these are all the jargons, I can explain it to you. Economically viable and environmentally benign over their whole life cycle. So when I'm explaining it to my kids, my students, or my mentors, or my not mentors, mentors are teaching me. So my colleagues or my juniors or my friends, that whatever we are using right now, we are using in that sustainable manner that it will be available for the future's 2 generations. So that's a clear definition of how do we use the resources. That's the production part. On the consumption part, we need to take care of all the resources which we are consuming for recycling, for reusing. So I'm glad that we will have a glass bottles here. That's one of the sustainable way of using it. We have, I think there are specific bottles in STPI as well they're using. Whether it is sustainable or not, that's another question, but it is better than the plastic bottles. That is to be very sure. I'm very sure that that's one of the good thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, basically it's a holistic approach of systematic change. If we talk about the circular economy, whatever is producing in the country, we are reusing it, while we are reusing it as it is or after the recycling. That's up to you, whether we want to recycle it or we want to reuse it as it is. So although economic, as I said, that economic growth is essential for SDG achievement, and no other variable is as important as GDP growth, though people believe that the happiness is more important than the GDP growth. And I always say that a farmer sitting in his village on his, we call it charpai, it's a bed. He's very happy. He's singing his songs and otherwise, but he has very less money, but he's happy. So whether we want that happiness or we want to grow, that's one of the questions. And then there are many indicators of happiness, many indicators of growth, many indicators of development we can talk about. But GDP growth is one important area on which we need to focus. Though decoupling environment degradation from economic growth is also vital, that implies doing more and better with less, but increasing net welfare gains. So as far as the society gain is concerned, that's different than the selfish gains, which we call it the utility theory in economics, that we want to increase our consumption, we want to increase our utility, we need to increase our welfare. That's a selfish utility function. On the other hand, we have a society welfare function, welfare gains from the economic activities by reducing excess resource use, degradation and pollution along the whole life cycle, thus increasing quality of life. So that our kids should not say, or the young lot should not say, that you have extracted the resources, the natural resources, and we cannot use those resources because you have ruined that. And increasing the sustainable management of resources and achieving resource efficiency through production and consumption phases the life cycle. It includes less resource extraction, waste disposal, and reuse of products and services. I was talking to one of the major big shots of private sector, and they said, we are recycling more water each year. I said, it is not a sustainable way. You should use less resources and then say that we are recycling it, because using it more water for more production, that the intensity of water is increasing, then that's not the sustainable way. So again, the production side of sustainable consumption and production. We have hazardous waste as well in it. We have AQI in goal 11 as well. So so sustainable consumption is not just goal 12, it includes other goals as well. Since we are reading it, so I can say it offers opportunities such as creation of new markets to green products, green products. So we can export that. There's a hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles. So electronic motorbikes, which we are looking at in the markets as well. So these are again, all kinds of activities, all kinds of products available right now in Pakistan and other parts of the Asia. Then we have decent jobs as well as more efficient welfare generating natural resource management. Thus, we may evolve to a new system where materials never become waste and natural nature is regenerated. In a circular economy, products and materials are kept in circulation through the process like maintenance, reuse, refurbishment, remanufacturing, recycling, and recomposing. So all kind of re's are there when we are talking about sustainable consumption and production. Remember, consumption is as important as production. So we cannot say that private sector should do this. We should have our own component. We should have our own yes or no for sustainable consumption and production. And overall, the circular economy is concerned, it is goal 6, which is water and sanitation. So it's part of sustainable consumption and production. There are several goals like integrated water resource management. That's again the sustainable consumption side of water, which you are using. It's right now 63%, and we are increasing it. The baseline in 2017 was 50, and we are improving in 6. We have improved in 6 years by 13%, so 2% per year. Though we are not up to the target, but we will be able to achieve 77% by 2030 as far as the integrated water management is concerned, which is not the indicator of goal 12, but it is indicator of goal 6, but part of sustainable consumption and production is interlinked with it. Then goal 7, goal 8, we have material footprint. Goal 11, which is sustainable communities and sustainable cities, in which we have recycling, we have hazardous waste, we have AQI index in it. Goal 12, which is sustainable consumption and production by naming it. Goal 13, which says adaptation and mitigation of climate action. Goal 14, which is marine life or life below water. And then the biodiversity goal of goal 15, which is life on the land. So role of different institutions are important. I just want to conclude here. The government may act as a regulator and monitor the progress. That's us. Though we do not like the regulations, Abid Saab always say in most of the TV shows that deregulation is very important. Yes, deregulation is very important, but more important is rationalization of these regulations, that where it is fit, we should have it. Where it does not fit, we should not have it. So rationalize the regulations, but regulations is important, and then monitoring the progress. And after monitoring the progress, STPI and other think tanks may evaluate the performance of what we are doing. For businesses, innovation and design solutions can both enable and inspire individuals to lead more sustainable lifestyles, reducing impacts and improving well-being. The consumer may comply through reducing waste, being thoughtful about what you buy, and choosing the sustainable option whenever possible. One of our colleagues used to pay 3 times of the price, whatever is available in the market, or even the popsicles, that it is the packing is of a recycled material. So a popsicle is available for ₹10, and she used to spend 300 rupees on it. So it's 30 times basically. So that's if you want to do it, it's up to you. But that's a sustainable or responsible consumption pattern which you follow. Don't throw away food and reduce your consumption of plastic, one of the main pollutants of the ocean and the rivers. Carrying a reusable bag, refusing to use plastic straws, and recycling plastic bottles are good ways to do your part every day. So there are different other things, other work, other tasks, which as a consumer we can do. So we are all sitting here as a consumer as well. We always talk about the adaptation and mitigation plans. Civil society is a good resource to sensitize the community, and that's where we are lacking again a blame game. That civil society is not doing their own tasks, but they're doing different things. Academia is a good resource to educate and comply to the SCP. So if you want to really look into the sustainable consumption and production university, the university which is implementing it is BUITMS, Balochistan University of, I think, Information Technology and something. So they're doing very fine in it. I think if we have a sustainable university ranking as far as the goal 12 or as SCP is concerned, it must be a #1 university. And in that, since SDG is all-inclusive and equity-based agenda, thus we must not leave anyone behind. Gender inclusivity and disability inclusive policy for SCP will lead to all-inclusive and sustainable outcomes. Right now, I do not see any gender or disability inclusive policies in Pakistan or in the literature of SCP globally. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kamal. The one-liner message which I drawn from his keynote address is that we should think twice or many times when we start thinking of buying something, because it consumes resources. I guess this is your one-liner. And second thing is that sustainable growth, not only growth, sustainable growth. So that's the message. Thank you so much, Dr. for your valuable remarks. Here, the session, the introductory session, or what we suggested, the setting the scene session, that's going to close now. I would like to thank Dr. Kamal Saab, Dr. Abid Suleri Saab, Sanjay, and Shabnam and Ms. Barusha being us in this session. And I would request Guraya Saab and Shabnam to stay here for the next panel. And thank you for all the panelists. Now I would request other panelists to join. Now I would like to request other panelists. Haridesh Joshi, please join us here. Ms. Shabnam is already there. Aftab Alam Saab, please join us. Engineer Member Abdul Jabbar Saab, please join us here. Amira Sawara, please join us here. Dr. Saab, we will hear you also in the, thing. Please join us here. Mr. Arif Rahman Saab, you will be the moderator. Now I will hand over the mic and the stage to you to run the stage so that you can continue with your discussion plan.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Shafkat Saab, and a very interesting opening. Ali Kamal Saab, spoken like a true economist, and the rest of the panelists, Dr. Abid Suleri, also giving very useful insights. And Sanjay, as usual, summing up with regards to what Switch Asia is trying to achieve in this technical assistance project. When I was sitting there and listening to some of the terms that were taken in this opening, I came across several, and I felt that it's an extremely complicated discussion. We heard some very hardcore economic terms. I think when I think about it, things like global treaties, SDG targets, industrial policies, resource allocation, circular economy. Dr. Ali Kamal also talked about decoupling the economy and the environment, which different people have different views on. And he also talked about disparities, I think, which is maybe at the core of trying to ensure sustainable consumption and production. So like almost all the other SDGs, I think they're all interlinked. They're extremely complex to handle on their own. And so SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, or sustainable consumption and production, is no different. We are gathered here today to actually start the discussion on how we can think about sustainable consumption and production with climate action itself. So SDG 12 and 13, how can they be treated in the same way, in the same sort of planning phases as would other SDGs? So I think it's obviously this discussion will only start today. It will take quite some time for us to actually reach any recommendations, with the eventual objective of trying to see if we can somehow incorporate sustainable consumption and production principles into the NDC revision, Pakistan's NDC revision, which is due, as you know, in 2025. Some of the very important things that we want to talk about is the general perception of sustainable consumption and production with regards to the climate agenda. That's one thing that we would have the panelists or the discussants talk about. We also want to know if there are any barriers and challenges with regards to this integration. If there are any opportunities attached to integration itself. And obviously, we are interested in any policy recommendations. I'm also in the middle of intervention by the esteemed panelists. I will probably also invite the audience to come in and maybe ask a question or two, and also to take the discussion forward. We have a very distinguished panel today. I think Shafkat Saab has already introduced them. Gigi, do we have some space? I think we also have Dr. Saqib in the audience. I'm sorry. I missed you. Gigi, ठीक. So one thing that we heard about, our perceptions, and I would just like to maybe have Radish, who is an independent writer. Sustainable consumption production, I feel, is something to do with personal choices also, a lot to do with personal choices. And probably that's where it starts. So do you feel the media, in general, has a role to play in this? You've also been part of various COPs where you have, covered mostly on the policy side also. So do you feel like there's space here for the media to actually come in and, talk to the ordinary person on how this can be done?
They have around 500 or more famous street journals. And I'm not sure if the will be common. And these symbols, these street journals, they have talk about climate change, they talk about environment, they talk about complaints, they talk about things, but they talk mostly, unfortunately, during the event, like talk about climate change when it happens in Pakistan and their states that big part of it. It happens in Indian areas that glaciers are melting. It happens that we have the record wave. So they have to chip it in, they have to keep more sustainably. The coverage also has to be consistent. That's number one. Number two, they have time to find out they people understand it for the last 5 days time. So we have been talking about marriage, but now we talk in Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, that just put the they talk that you find that all they pay and swift motion. Similarly, we have we love, so we talk about security and coffee, for example. Coffee will not happen if you don't get it. So these are kind of ways of getting slowly people media get. But there's a caveat and there's a funny effect. We live in a world where consumption is for profit making intelligent. And most of the media channels and newspapers are backed by government profit. So why would they pay for student value? The biggest provider of the game, we have to get in the first page. Because that's very right. And these people reduce prices and encourage buy more. You want to buy one packet of biscuit, you can't anymore. You will have to buy 10 packets because the package like this and budget. So this is something we have to also, because I already like and I work for the owners who are subscribers. So we also have to be guiding among consumers that if you consume so many things, you have to consume reuse. You have to, our whole, paper I work, digital platform I work is pay, keep, use, free. So if it is subscribed, you can go and go, which is adding one can go and very optimistic about it. So when it happens, then you have something which we are honestly talking about sustainable lifestyle. Otherwise, it will be occasional.
True.
It will be occasionally, as I said, even 2000. But if you want to see the value of sustainable consumption, as we had 1952 million ton of plastic, but now we have 50 million ton of plastic. So we have exceeded more than 25 times the production of plastic. So that is something.
So I feel like you're holding the private sector in terms of the way that they market their products and the way that they want you to consume and change your consumption patterns. I feel engineer Abdul Jabbar Saab, being from the private sector, do you feel that that is true? That is something that the private sector, obviously they need to make things work, they need to be profitable, but do you also feel that they have a part to play in changing production as well as consumption patterns, not just for the ordinary consumer, but generally throughout the country in the industrial sector also?
Well, I think if the producer, let's talk about private sector, also has to be a responsible citizen. We all together, I'm say the way Ali came and said that gossips and blame game, you see. So I'm say this is a fact also. He tried to sort of connect the things that you are promoting the sales. Yes, promotion of sales is our right. But the problem is that along with promotion of sales, we have to also consider, what we are discussing over here. Circular economy and its circularity, it has a very, very old history. In fact, it is nothing, but I would think that this is efficiency. So this efficiency, how to achieve, was always through the change of the capital goods and machinery, which were engaged in production, you see. So here are three things. You consume, you produce, and you consume. But consume through what he has been telling, that consume more. But then I've also explained you, the more has also to be integral to the responsibility which everybody owns to the society. If since yesterday and day before yesterday, I was hearing global trade, the lady is over here from Syria, I think she just scared me yesterday. Global trade, climate change, global trade. Well, I'm also buying this theory, based on the evidences, which just rightly Sanjay was here and he just said, it is a scientific evidence. So let us talk about social sciences, physical sciences. In all these perspectives, yes. But the problem is that we have to interface. For example, Hafkat came in the beginning, he gave us certain slides, which I've seen earlier, that efforts are there. Intra-governmental efforts have been there. Not only intra-governmental, but I can say that the governmental efforts are also there. But the problem is that how to really make it more viable as a volunteer situation than as a mandatory situation. Because I'm also a member of the board of Pakistan Standard Quality Control for the last 15 years. So we are only discussing standards. But in whole standard of jargons, where we have 17,000 Pakistani standards, we only apply on the mandatory situation, only 170, you see. This in the society, you see, you have to create a sense of how to sort of take it volunteer, also mandatory for compliance. Yesterday, I also heard, I think, Basalt Treasure of Knowledge who are speaking. So I'm also getting influence that Ali said something, the one who was from Pakistan Agriculture sort of Research Center, he said alone in Pakistan, 65 kilograms, per capita, let's say, take a word from the economy, is being wasted, you see. And he said that if that waste can be contained, you see, to 5 to 10%, probably 42 million people can have the food for the consumption. So you see, the things are really have to be aligned. And I personally believe that how the alignment should take place. For example, alone in Pakistan, I have been in public sector also working as director and all that about 15 years back, when I was director in Swiss Southern Gas Company, we had wastages of only 7%. And today we have wastages, I tell you religiously, that wastages are more than 20%. So on the other hand, we believe that resource management and waste management, waste management has to convert to the resource management. And in that whole alone, we are also talking about optimal or to the level use of the resources, which are for all, not for only the producer in the private sector, who sometimes I can agree that with abundant caution that he is more obsessed with the money making than any other thing, which also should materially matter. And one thing is coming also in my mind when I was just looking at the paper produced. So I was thinking they should also be consumed appropriately. So when I was dividing that, probably I think I should not speak more than 5 to 6 minutes. So before I get a call to stop, I will try to stop.
Thank you.
But this is also a fact that I was also chairman of a very big corporation, public sector, though I remained from the private sector. That was water sanitation and this. So landfill sites. But then when I went to Austria, I saw that the same landfill site had 12 other, you see, for example, outflows, inflows from where so many other things were being contained, like Ali and other people called about chemical and all that. So yes, I think in a way one can say that we have to jointly sort of put in our efforts that this circular economy concept has to be there in practice, preferably voluntarily adopted. Last thing only I'll tell you that there was one standard corporate social responsibility. I was in that involved in that standard 13 session, and it lasted for 7 years. Now it is there in the Europe, and people really now are caring for that standard.
True.
It's not mandatory. So I think I have consumed my time, and thank you very much.
No, we will definitely come back. Amira, this is very interesting. I think, you know, it's difficult to decide, you know, which level you want to start this discussion. Do you start it at the household level, at the individuals, or do you start it taking, you know, coming down from a global perspective of how we look into, you know, climate change policies, other global treaties? What do you think is a good starting point? And do you feel, you know, with all these treaties and all these other things that we have in place, do you feel there is a space for integration between, you know, these two different discourses? No. No.
All right, thank you. I feel like we have to look at the problem in a systemic way, which means we can't just focus on one, you know, scale and not the other. And we also can't just focus on production or just focus on consumption. So, you know, one of the phrases one of my colleagues uses is we have to enable both sides of the scissors if we're going to cut the problem at the root. So if I just talk a little bit about production initially and then consumption, if we look at production, taking a step back at a global level, you know, what is driving our sustainability challenges, or what is the fundamental driver of the climate crisis, as an example? Primarily it is fossil fuels, to be honest. They have caused about 86% of the emissions, which have put us in the position that we're in right now. They threaten every single SDG. We've done some research on that. They don't bring energy security. So if we look at some of the other countries where this has been studied, Nigeria, for example, Nigeria is a huge producer of fossil fuels, and yet over 50% of the population don't have energy security. They also drive inequality, issues around mortality. So about 1 in 5 deaths worldwide are related to, directly or indirectly, fossil fuel production. And on top of all of that, about $13 million a minute go into fossil fuel subsidies. So we have a production problem from the very root cause of the crisis that we're in. But we don't actually have a global agreement which can support a managed transition away. So we have the Paris Agreement on climate change, which is very, very important, but it's taken 30 years of negotiations to get the language of fossil fuels in there, which tells you the challenge that we have really politically. A couple of really important studies came out in the last 2 weeks. One is called the Production Gap Report, which was produced by United Nations Environment Programme, and they're looking at the planned production of fossil fuels by governments and industry over the coming years, and we've got more than double that would be, planned production of fossil fuels that would be consistent with our 1.5 degree target. So we have a baked in production line, which is causing us future vulnerabilities and the inability to actually reach our goals. And then if we look at the emissions gap report, which came out just a few days ago, again by United Nations Environment, currently I believe there's about 40, let me find that, it's in my notes, yes. So we still need to cut emissions by 42% in order to be consistent with the 1.5 degree goal. So we really have to get to the production side as well as the consumption side. And one of the things that we think is important in the organization I work for, the Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative, is to develop a new treaty which complements the Paris Agreement, which can help governments to really plan out a managed transition which is fair and equitable. So at the moment, countries like Pakistan are really struggling within a global economic context, which is very historical. There's lots of historical factors which make Pakistan and others vulnerable. But countries like Pakistan should have more agency in the global economy. And one way to do that is to actually collaborate more effectively with other countries that are experiencing similar challenges and to come up with a new treaty which basically manages the transition and ensures that the historical emitters are doing more in terms of providing support. So that's something we think is important. But it's also really important to strengthen cooperation in a context globally where multilateralism is under threat. Whether multilateralism has actually been beneficial to countries such as Pakistan gets questioned a lot, but also, there's challenges to do with polarization on the topic of sustainability and climate. Polarization is on the rise, so what we need is leadership and cooperation across different countries, organizations, and governments. The private sector and civil society have to work together. There's also a lot in the SDGs which can be incredibly helpful. So we have lots of great indicators in the SDGs and they're being monitored and evaluated. Of course, there is space for improvement, but those should be integrated into the process of the Paris Agreement and potentially a new treaty. Now, just to come onto the other side, which is consumption, which I worked in quite a lot in my last role. Fundamentally, we can't reach our goals if people aren't engaged. So people across the world, and particularly in countries that are most responsible for climate change and for environmental degradation, they need to have a process where they start to see this is important in their own lives and they want to do things to sort of fix the problem. So if I talk about the UK, for example, where I'm from, we have a net zero target, and about 62% of that requires individuals to do something, but 1 in 10 people in the UK don't know what to do. So there's very high concern actually across publics in some of these high emitting responsible countries, but governments are not enabling people to actually do stuff differently. So we need to think about that. And there is a structure within the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement, which is called Action for Climate Empowerment. So under that, every country in the world has to create a public engagement plan. And of course, it's going to look very different for a country like the UK compared to a country like Pakistan, where perhaps the public engagement is much more about resilience and adaptation and holding the government to account on its commitments. But this is something that's really, really important. And we also have to help businesses. Businesses, again, research has been done in different countries. I'll just give the UK because it's top of mind. 77% of small and medium enterprises want to do something on climate and sustainability, but they're not experiencing any support from government. There's no regulatory support. There's no practical support. So they want to do stuff and they don't know how. So from my perspective, that engagement piece is so fundamental to the consumption piece, but it's also fundamental to supporting individuals who are experiencing inequality and marginalization. They're experiencing repeated extreme weather events across countries like Pakistan, to feel that they have agency in their future and to feel like they're being supported in taking steps forward. Just one thing I wanted to add, talking about cricket, I was involved in an initiative last year with the cricket captain in Australia. So in Australia, again, it's a very privileged country in the global economy, and it has a huge carbon footprint, but ordinary people are struggling, and this is really affecting the future of the sport. So the cricket captain there has set up an initiative which is literally aiming to engage publics on how they can adapt their lifestyles and also how businesses can get involved. And, you know, I used to say to them all the time, you should partner up with, you know, Pakistan and India. There's cricket is massive. It's a great way to engage the public. So just a thought, food for thought there at the end of that. But yeah, if anyone would like to talk more about the idea of a fossil fuel treaty, I'd love to chat.
Thank you, Amira. So it's a totally different perspective in terms of global treaties and how this, you know, discourse can actually come down to the, you know, to individuals. The UNDP, Goraya Saab, has been, you know, right up there in terms of, you know, the entire journey, especially within Pakistan, whether it be, you know, from a policy perspective or helping, you know, work with the civil society in a big way. Do you feel that this is something that complements all the efforts that have already taken place, or is it a totally new discussion for you? Okay, so he'll summarize. Shabnam Baloch, when we heard, you know, different global treaties, as well as, you know, when we talk about perceptions, you have a very difficult job with respect to, you know, resource allocation within your organization and how you feel it can be, you know, programmed in a different way. Do you actually look at these sort of indicators that are related with sustainable consumption and production, or do you feel like you have your own way of programming within your own organization? Is it a conversation that you will be involved in the future?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. First of all, I really like the topic. I mean, the tagline of the topic, light at the end of the tunnel. So I was just thinking, who is that light? And I think we are that light because we're talking about it. And we are the individuals, we are the organizations, we are the professionals who have committed ourselves to do that. And it is really important to talk about hope in times of despair, because whether it is conflict around the world, whether it is situation of the climate change or the humanitarian crisis or the displacement crisis, there's a lot of despair we see and we are encountering on the daily basis. So it's really great to talk about it. Coming back to your question, I'll start from the last part of the question, like, do we really think about all these indicators and the discourse, especially in the humanitarian sector? I would say, loudly say yes, because the humanitarian sector is the one which is being impacted the most by all this climate change and the resulting humanitarian crisis, whether it is climate change related weather events or droughts, floods, tsunamis, heat waves, and you name it. Everything is happening, even these pandemics and endemics, everything under the sky is happening. So since we are the one who are impacted, but on the other hand, there's another side of the coin, which is the humanitarian sector has grown over the period of time. It is not just one organization or two organizations or some volunteers or volunteer NGOs who are doing this work, but it has emerged as a sector. And we have been criticizing to the sector, to ourselves as well, like what is the carbon footprint of humanitarian agencies? Because if you look at our work and our programming, there's a huge procurement we do. There's a huge amount of travel which we do to deliver our program. So we have been criticizing. But having said that, we have adopted a lot of these indicators, especially when it comes to the procurement. If I give some of the good examples, even in Pakistan, for our own organization, we have adopted policies for the green procurement, no plastic, nothing. And we also identify the indicators which are required to have these green procurements. It has to be local. We need to see, you know, how energy intense it is, what is the amount of water it is used, from where the raw material is coming. And we have been educating our vendors as well, because it's very important to have this discussion with the suppliers, with the vendors, even the partners, because if you have this discussion only internally and among just a close group of stakeholders, it is not going to have any impact. Having said that, I think we have been talking a lot about the production, not only within this group, but overall. There's a lot of talk about production, the whole value chain and the whole cycle of that production. But I think the consumption part is still under discussed. It's very important to talk about responsible consumption. And when we talk about responsible consumption or the sustainable consumption, I think it's very important to educate the consumers. We as consumers, even us, we don't know. I mean, all these products which are just sitting here, we don't know what is the carbon footprints, what material has been used, how it is going to be disposed of. Even when we deliver humanitarian program and aids in our communities, we educate them how to dispose of later on, whether it is a dignity kit or a health and hygiene kits or the food packets or temporary latrines or the camp management. We educate them that how to dispose of this. So the education to the consumers is very important, and we all have to play our role. Last but not the least, because I'm mindful of the time as well, I had a couple of more points, but one last point is the individual responsibility. We talk a lot about these big treaties and the government and the UN and everybody, but the individual responsibility is very important. I read once in China, there are individual targets. Every citizen has their own targets, and the government, monitor those targets, and the citizens, they also feel so proud that we have targets and we have delivered, and this is how we have contributed. If China can do it with this huge population, why can't us? So I think these are a couple of the thoughts I wanted to share. So as I mentioned, I'm mindful of the time, so I would not.
Thank you. Aftab Sahab, Ali Kamal Sahab also talked about disparities, but he also talked about how every individual in this country is actually wasting half a kilogram of either food or other things during the day. You've also worked with the youth quite a lot. You've worked in different communities and at different levels. Do you feel like resource allocation is a problem at the policy level, or do you feel that different segments of the society, especially in terms, if we talk about the policy level, water sector, for example, is one very inefficient sector that we have in this country. How does that contribute to the overall debate? And plus, coming down to youth and to communities, do you feel there is scope for work over there also?
Thank you very much, Arif Saab, Dr. Shafqat Saab and the team, and also the fellow panelists. I think I would like to connect this one with one of the previous questions. Where to start? I think an easier way to start is to look at the models and patterns. For example, in terms of production, if we convert the model into simple words, it is currently produce more, sell more, earn more. And for consumption, we used to be sustainable, like Dr. Abid mentioned previously, but now it is make, take, consume, and waste. I think we have to change this. The business model, which is produce more, sell more, earn more, has resulted that instead of reducing greenhouse gases by 43% or 50% by 2030, we are about to increase 16% more instead of reducing. I think there are those kind of connection as well. For business, I think countries like ours and others, it would be very important to have an ecosystem, supporting ecosystem, which means incentives to industries to invest in new technologies. For example, if we take water in Pakistan, which is one of the biggest manifestation of climate change, but also our own mismanagement, our industrial production is not water efficient. The shoe pair I'm wearing, the leather shoe pair, one shoe pair takes 8,000 liters of water. And in terms of one shirt, it takes around 2,900 liters to make one shirt. And one cola can, which is 0.75 ml, it requires 200 liters of water. So our production system is not water efficient. We have to make it so. But for that, we need investment from private sector, but we need some support and incentive from government as well. If we talk about agriculture sector, for example, I hope we'll eat some rice at today's lunch, but 1 kilo of rice in Pakistan takes 5 to 7,000 liters of water, which is manifold increase in terms of the global average. And same is true for our household consumption. On average, in Pakistan, we waste 300 liters of water in our toilets. So we have to make those changes. So I have talked about the production side. In terms of consumption side, I think one is awareness, which is very well explained by Shabna, but I think we have to make it more fashionable. Because now it's more fashionable to buy more, to show more, to waste more. We have to make it fashionable. And I think here our youth, media, private sector, NGOs, government, all are here. So I think perhaps we can sit after this meeting to plan how to do that. But I think in terms of our future plans, it's very important that this sustainable consumption and production not only reduce greenhouse gases, it also prepares us for adaptation, because we can save resources which can be used for adaptation.
Dr. Saab, we came across a lot of numbers, especially now. Does the science actually support all these numbers, or is there more terrible news along the way? Something that you could probably enlighten us about.
Getting to the main idea about the circular economy, it's really very important to understand one thing, that we have actually required the integration of the resources and the integration of the organizations to implement the real concept of the circular economy. I'm giving one example from the industrial sector. I work for the cement sector, and in the cement sector abroad, in the global context, they are using coal as an energy fuel, fossil fuel as an energy source. And in our coal in Pakistan, we have a problem of sulfur content. In abroad, how they are handling this problem, they are using this sulfur for the production of synthetic gypsum. So what I'm trying to say, we need to optimize the production pathways, and scientifically that would be very important to optimize these pathways using the intermediates and the products which we are getting through these production cycles. Like giving another example, in Pakistan, I work for Angro Inter for Block 2. We are involved in mining projects, and we are getting some fractions from the coal minings. And these fractions are the waste materials. But we are actually converting this waste material as a source of humic material, using as a biofertilizer. So what I'm trying to say, the concept of the circular economy is only applicability once we need to optimize the production cycles in the industrial pathways. And concerning to the consumptions, I do 100% agree with the other panelists, and thank you very much for giving these good suggestions. The role of science communication is very important. Once we need to inculcate this concept of science communication in our youth concepts, that using something is the core responsibility on your shoulder, you are answerable for that in future. So ultimately, while integrating, we have a very good line ministries. Almost every ministries have a great concepts. So the things we are actually missing in our concepts is the proactive approach, number one. Number two, we are almost working in silos. We have a good concepts of how to save the food in the agriculture ministry. We have a different concepts of technical solutions in the science and technology ministry. One of my panelists is talking about the PSQ. I was dealing in ministry about the PSQ. I always provoke about one thing, that we have to design standards. Designing a standard is one concept, but implementing this standard with the synchronizations of the adaptability, that is the key requirement. So in my personal opinion, the circular economy concept is only applicability only once we need to synchronize the resources and to optimize the production cycles for the better consumption. Thank you.
So it's extremely complicated. And as you can see, almost every sector and almost every SDG is somehow related to this. I'm going to invite Mr. Amir Guraya Saab for his closing remarks. Maybe he can try to summarize the entire discussion from all the different angles. So it will be very interesting to see what his take is on this. Guraya Saab. It's up to you. You can do it. Okay, sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed panel. 7 experts, 2 highly qualified moderators, and a keynote address. So I'll try to do some justice to whatever has been said. I'd like to start with multilateralism was mentioned. At our stage, being the 8th most vulnerable country to climate change, the Indus, our lifeline, being the 2nd most polluted river in the world, devastating floods last year. I guess we are at the moment, COP27, we went with the slogan, which became quite, which was taken up by many, that whatever happens in Pakistan will not remain in Pakistan. So having said that, I think this is where Pakistan stands, to lay the concept, lay the context of everything. I guess sustainable consumption and sustainable production, what the panel members shared, is at the base of everything. And if, let's say, consumption is not sustainable and production is not sustainable, and of course, I wouldn't go into the details of what the esteemed panelists mentioned about the commercial viability and also being consumption, but I have a very small example to share from my previous work life, where one of our colleagues who's lived in south of France, she told me that they don't have a refrigerator in their house. And now, I'm not suggesting that, because people have their own issues and problems, and of course, there's a commercial angle to that as well. But I think what was mentioned also by the panel, at the individual responsibility level, you have to start small. You have to look at one's own carbon footprint, where it is going. And of course, it is backed up by policies, and it can be backed up by the government. The statistics which Aftab Saab mentioned were mind-boggling. I guess, if this is the situation, and if one starts looking at it from one's own angle, probably that becomes more of a issue where we can bring it at a massive scale also. I think 2 key things which the keynote speaker, talked about, Mr. Ali Kamal, was sustainability, that how, and sustainable production and sustainable, consumption is both sustainability. It's looking at, both pictures, that whether, production is sustainable and whatever is being consumed, in the way it is being consumed, is sustainable or not. Again, I think another point which came across from a lot of panelists was that should we be moving from cosmetic to substantive, side of the story, which actually, in many ways, you see garbage distribution happening in many parts of the world, including Pakistan. How much of that is being actually recycled? I don't remember the figures, but I guess it's less than 30%. Experts would know better, of whatever is being distributed. So what exactly is the use of the resources being spent on that distribution if it is ultimately is not being recycled and it's going to end up in the same place? I guess these are sustainable. So what I would add, that sustainable practices probably will start at a very micro level, and then it can go up to all. Also, I think sustainability, I really liked that sustainability was mentioned as efficiency also. Absolutely. Of course, efficiency is not just the speed of production or whatever. It's also the cost of production, the carbon footprint you leave while producing certain things, and how sustainable it is. So I guess, if we look at the efficiency angle, that also looks at the governance angle of the various things, and that also makes it more sustainable. Carbon footprint recognition, I've already said about it. I guess this is very, very important to recognize what is the carbon footprint of each act which happens and each act we are up to. Last but not the least, I guess, incentivizing, sustainable production, incentivizing sustainable consumption. I would say there is a perverse incentive to that at the moment. Let's say, from the commercial angle, what do I get if I'm pursuing sustainable? And a lot of people will pay lip service to that through, just boxing it down into corporate social responsibility, but it is much beyond that. I would like to end with, what was said about, making sustainable as fashionable. I guess we have success stories, we have examples. I think if you look at the health industry and campaigns in the health industry, smoking started, first as being very fashionable in the 70s, even in the 80s, and now it's not fashionable anymore. So there are examples where, one can, learn from, though quite different from what we are trying to say. I think with that, I would like to thank the audience and the panel for a wonderful discussion here today. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Guraya Saab, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, the panelists. I think this was an important first discussion that we had on this topic, and I'm sure we will have quite a few more. Thank you to the audience. My apologies that we are a bit short of time and we could not take any questions. But if anyone does have any questions for the panelists, please feel free to share your questions with the organizers here, and we'll try to get them a response as soon as possible. Thank you so much.